8. "This is Asher Lev," I said into the telephone. "Hello, Asher Lev." "It's the middle of March," I said. "You saw Guernica?" "Yes." "How many times did you see it?" I told him. "You studied Guernica?" "Yes." "What else did you do?" "I drew each section of it at least twice." "What else?" "I can draw it from memory." "What else?" "I studied the drawings he made before and after he painted it." "Come to my studio this Sunday in the afternoon." He gave me an Upper Manhattan address. "Can you come?" "I can come at 2:00. "You will stay until dinner. We do not keep kosher. I will see you Sunday." "Yes." "Asher Lev." "Yes?" "You are familiar with the story of the Massacre of the Innocents?" "No." "Then you will read about it, please, for Sunday. You will find it in the New Testament, the book of Matthew, chapter 2, verse 16. I did not say anything. "The New Testament," he said. "The Bible of the Goyim." "Yes." "You will find it and read it." "Yes," I said. "You are familiar with the painting Massacre of the Innocents by Guido Rene?" "No." "You will go to the library and find a reproduction of it and study it. If you cannot find Guido Rene's Massacre of the Innocents, then find Poussin's, but study one of them at least. Do you understand?" "Yes." "I will see you Sunday at 2:00. "Yes. Goodbye." "Goodbye, Asher Lev." I went to the library after school the next day and read the passage in the New Testament about King Herod ordering his soldiers to kill all the children of Bethlehem who were 2 years old and younger, after having been told that a child had been born who would become King of the Jews. It felt strange holding and reading a copy of the Christian Bible. I could not understand what the story had to do with Guernica. I found a small reproduction of Massacre of the Innocents by Guido Rene in a thick volume on the history of art. I looked at it closely. I had my reproduction of Guernica with me. I opened it and compared the two pictures. The faces of the women in the Rene painting intrigued me, especially that of the woman in the upper left of the picture. I found the Poussin painting in another volume and studied it carefully. After a while I closed the books and went out of the library. It was dark and cold. I took the subway home. My mother had a class on Thursday nights. Mrs. Rackover gave me supper. I went into my room and thought about the Guernica. Mrs. Rackover came in to say she was leaving. I heard the apartment door close behind her. I was alone in the apartment. I sat at my desk and looked at the reproduction of Guernica, which I had put on the wall near my bed. The city of Guernica had been destroyed by the German Air Force in 1937 during the Spanish Civil War. Picasso had painted the mural for the Spanish Pavilion of the International Exhibition in Paris that year. I knew that painting by heart and could draw it in my mind. I had dreamed about the bull and the horse. I had drawn the screaming, pain-filled faces of the women in my notebooks during classes. I had put the anguished women with the dead child onto the back of an English exam book, and had gotten it back with a written remark from the teacher about this being an English, not an art, examination. He gave me a D on the test. I did not understand what Guernica had to do with the Christian Bible. I did not understand what it had to do with the Massacre of the Innocents. I felt upset and uncomfortable at having read from the Christian Bible. I thought of my father. I thought of the Mashpia. I wondered if the Rebbe really knew what Jacob Kahn was doing. I felt vaguely unclean. I had some homework. I started working on it quickly, perfunctorily. In the middle of an algebra problem, I found myself drawing from memory the head of one of the screaming women in Guido Rene's Massacre of the Innocents. I looked at the head, and then went back to the algebra problem. I heard the apartment door open and close. My mother was home. She came into my room a moment later carrying a book. "There was no mail from your father?" she asked. "No." "Did you have supper?" "Yes." "What's the matter?" "Nothing." "Are you all right? Do you have a fever?" "No." I glanced at the notebook with the algebra problem and the Rene head. "Her child was massacred," I said. She looked startled. I told her about the painting. Then I told her about the account of the massacre in the Christian Bible. "I didn't like reading from that book. I saw where it said Jews killed Jesus. I feel guilty reading the Bible of the Goyim." She gazed at the head in the notebook and did not respond. "Why did he ask me to read that?" "When you see him Sunday, ask him, 'Do you want something to drink before going to sleep?' No, Mama. Have you had milk today? Yes. I bought you this book. You said to me once that you liked the paintings of Robert Henry. A professor in the art department gave me this for you to read. She put the book on my desk. Good night, Asher. Don't stay up late. You told the professor about me? I said my son is interested in art and likes Robert Henry. He told me to tell you to read this book. He also told me that Jacob Kahn is one of the greatest artists alive today. He worked with Picasso in Paris before the First World War. He was a little astonished that you're being taught by Jacob Kahn. She smiled wryly. Everyone seems astonished by that. Good night, Asher. I have a meeting early in the morning with the Rebbe's staff. Khrushchev's speech about Stalin also has everyone astonished. She went from the room. A moment later, I heard her moving about in the kitchen. I looked at the book she had put down on my desk. It was called The Art Spirit. I finished my homework quickly. In bed, I leafed idly through the book, reading passages at random. I liked this man. I liked the warm and honest way he wrote. I lay in bed leafing through the book, and I read, If you want to know how to do a thing, you must first have a complete desire to do that thing. Then go to kindred spirits, others who have wanted to do that thing, and study their ways and means, learn from their successes and failures, and add to your quota. Thus you may acquire from the experience of the race. And with this technical knowledge you may go forward, expressing through the play of forms the music that is in you, and which is very personal to you. I was not sure I understood what the phrase, the play of forms, meant. I continued reading, skipping the passages on technique, which I was determined to read later. I read, He should be careful of the influence of those with whom he consorts, and he runs a great risk in becoming a member of a large society, for large bodies tend toward the leveling of individuality to a common consent, the forming and adherence to a creed. I read, You can do anything you want to do. What is rare is this actual wanting to do a specific thing, wanting it so much that you are practically blind to all other things, that nothing else will satisfy you. I read, An artist has got to get acquainted with himself just as much as he can. It is no easy job, for it is not a present-day habit of humanity. I read, Every great artist is a man who has freed himself from his family, his nation, his race. Every man who has shown the world the way to beauty, to true culture, who has been a rebel, a universal without patriotism, without home, who has found his people everywhere. I read that again. Then I read, The artist should have a powerful will. He should be powerfully possessed by one idea. He should be intoxicated with the idea of the thing he wants to express. I began to read the book from the beginning, slowly. I woke in the night and found the book in my hands and the reading light on. I turned off the light and slept. In the morning, my mother said, You didn't sleep last night? It's a good book, Mama. Sit down and have your breakfast, Asher. Did you read the book? I looked through it quickly on the subway. Did you read what he said about an artist having to free himself? No, I don't remember that. I told it to her. I don't think I want to free myself that way, I said. In what way do you want to free yourself, Asher? I don't know. Eat your breakfast, she said softly, and I'll walk with you to school. I have the meeting to go to. There was no mail from my father that day, nor was there any mail from him the next day, which was Shabbos. My mother and I were in the living room late that Saturday night when the phone rang. I went to answer it. Asher Lev? It was Jacob Kahn. Yes. Bring all the drawings you made of Guernica. Bring other drawings, too, any you want. I'll bring them. You know how to travel? Yes. I will see you tomorrow at 2:00. My mother was at her desk reading. No, she said when I told her about the phone call. I think I ought to go with you the first time. I want to go alone. Asher, it's easier to get lost on the New York subway than it is to walk from here to your yeshiva. But I insisted, and in the end she consented. I would go alone. I was to be back by 7:00. If I could not be back by 7, I was to call her. I stayed up late that night, drawing sections of Guernica from memory. I spent a long time thinking about the faces of the women in the René and Poussin paintings, and about the story of the massacre in the Christian Bible. My mother was still at her desk when I finally went to bed. I had an algebra test the next day I had forgotten to study for. I did not do well. I came out of the school building at 1:00 and walked quickly to the subway. It was a cold, cloudy March day. I had left my books in school and carried with me only the sketchbook filled with my Guernica drawings and another sketchbook filled with drawings of my street. The subway was not crowded. I watched carefully for the stations where I needed to change trains. I noticed that the farther I traveled from Brooklyn, the more frequently I was stared at. In my dark blue winter coat and hat, and with my thin, pale features and red hair and dangling earlocks, I was not exactly a typical New Yorker. At one point in the journey, during a particularly long ride between stations, I opened my Guernica sketchbook and began leafing through the drawings. I saw the eyes and the round face of the elderly woman sitting next to me slowly grow wide with astonishment. I closed the sketchbook and looked out the window near my seat. We were in underground darkness outside the window, and I could see only my reflection. I spent the rest of the journey looking at my reflection in that dark window of the train. I got out at the 96th Street and Broadway stop. The wide street was crowded with people and traffic. I walked some blocks along Broadway and turned down a street toward the Hudson River. I found the address he had given me. It was an old gray brick loft building. I had to press a button outside the metal and glass front door. An old man with white hair and rheumy eyes opened the door. "Yes?" he said. He had a hoarse voice. "Jacob Kahn," I said. He looked at me out of the rheumy eyes, waiting. "My name is Asher Lev," I said. He nodded and stepped aside to let me in. He pointed to a book on a stand near the door. "Sign," he said. "And sign out when you leave. Building regulations. 5th floor for Mr. Kahn." He shuffled off toward the elevator. I followed. It was a slow, lumbering elevator. "You one of them artist fellers?" he asked. "Which?" "They come in and out all the time." He peered at me closely out his wet eyes. "You don't look like one of them," he said. His hoarse voice had begun to remind me vaguely of Udo Krinsky. The elevator lurched to a halt. He pulled open the metal door. "Mr. Kahn's place is on the last door on the right. You need the elevator when you're through. You push this button here and I'll come up." He pulled the metal door shut. The noisy whine of the elevator faded quickly. I walked down the corridor. It was dimly lighted and smelled vaguely of strong disinfectant cleanser. I stopped outside the door to Jacob Kahn's studio and waited. I was sweating heavily, and I removed my hat and coat. I left my skull cap on. I heard voices inside. I recognized Jacob Kahn's voice. The other was the voice of a woman. I stood there hesitantly. I stood there a long time. I looked at my wristwatch. It was a little past 2 o'clock. I knocked softly on the door. The voices did not stop. I rang the bell. The voices ceased abruptly, and I heard footsteps. The door was opened, and Jacob Kahn stood there, broad-shouldered, white-haired, and wearing paint-smeared dungarees, and a plaid shirt with the sleeves rolled up to the elbows. A cigarette stuck out from beneath his walrus mustache. With the sleeves of his shirt rolled up, I could see the muscles of his arms. They were powerful arms, and they looked sculpted from stone. "Come in, Asher Lev," he said. "Come in. Anna, the prodigy, is here." I felt his fingers grasp my arm. He took my coat and hat and tossed them somewhere. He pushed the door shut with a swift movement of his leg. "Welcome, Asher Lev," he said, smiling down at me. "It is good to see you here. Anna, where are you? Ah, here. Anna, this is my Asher Lev. Asher Lev, this is my Anna Schaefer." A woman had materialized suddenly from behind an enormous canvas. She was of medium height, matronly, with an oval face, sharp blue eyes, and short silvery hair. She wore a dark blue wool dress and had a long necklace of white beads. She offered me her hand. I hesitated. Jacob Kahn moved adroitly toward her, took the offered hand in his left hand, lifted my hand in his right hand, and joined our two hands together. I felt the woman's palm and fingers against my skin. Her flesh was warm and dry. "To the future," Jacob Kahn said solemnly. "To the beginning of good things. We are assembled to celebrate our glory, if I may paraphrase Apollinaire. Anna, it is not polite to stare." She was staring at my skullcap. I saw her eyes on the skullcap, then I saw them move slowly across my head and face to my side curls. They remained fixed on my side curls. "Anna," Jacob Kahn said softly. He removed the cigarette from his mouth and flicked ashes onto the bare wooden floor. "You did not tell me," the woman said to him, her eyes still on my side curls. "You are a tricky old man." "Are you upset with me that I did not tell you?" "Yes, I am upset. You are tricky and nasty." She did not sound upset. "He is a prodigy, Anna, a prodigy in Pios." "Pios?" She was still staring at me. "The hair you are gaping at, the earlocks." "Pios," she said. "Pios, and a skullcap, and dark clothes, and a prodigy." She looked at Jacob Kahn. "You are a mean, tricky, and nasty old man. You are not being nice to an old woman, Jacob Kahn." "On the contrary, my Anna, I am being very nice. I am being enormously nice. It is against my nature not to be nice. I introduced the boy to you without advanced preparation. All the disadvantages are his. All the advantages are yours. Could I be nicer?" "Yes," she said. "You could bring me a drink." Then she turned to him and said something in French. He laughed, stepped carefully between two huge canvases, and disappeared. She turned back to me slowly and smiled. "Come over here with me, Asherlev. Let us stand where there is more light." I followed her, treading carefully between the sculptures and easels and canvases and work tables that were the heavy traffic of that room. We stood near a wall of windows. The sky, filled with clouds that gave off grey light, seemed to border upon the windows. Beyond low rooftops and trees and a strip of highway, I could see the dark waters of the Hudson and the New Jersey shoreline. "Let me look at you in the light," she said. I saw her blue eyes moving past me. "You have Chagall's pale face. Do you suffer fainting spells?" "No." I asked Jacob which of the three he thought you might become. "The three?" "Modigliani, Stutin, and Pasquin. Pasquin's name was originally Pensas. Have you heard of those three? They were Jews." "I've seen some of their paintings. They were dedicated people. You have not been beaten for drawing, have you?" "No. Stutin was severely beaten when he was young. When he was your age, I believe. You are 13? "Yes. He was quite severely beaten. Orthodox Jews do not care much for painting, I understand. You are what is called a Hasid?" I nodded. "Your parents do not mind your drawing and painting?" I was quiet. She smiled faintly. "May I ask what your father does?" I told her. She seemed surprised. "How very interesting," she murmured. "Why aren't you and your mother with your father in Europe?" I told her that too, briefly. She looked at me intently. Then she looked out the window, her eyes narrow in the grey light. A barge moved slowly across the dark surface of the water. "Are you very religious?" she said quietly, still looking out the window. "I am an observant Jew." "What does that mean specifically?" I did not know what to say. She looked at me. "Do you believe in a special way? Do you behave in a special way?" "I believe in God and the Torah he gave to the Jewish people. I pray 3 times a day. I eat only kosher food. I observe Shabbos, the Sabbath, and festivals and holy days. We don't travel or work on the Sabbath and festivals and holy days. I believe the Rebbe is a gift to us by God to help lead us in our lives. I believe—" "The Rebbe?" she said. "The Rebbe is the leader of our group." "Ah," she murmured. "Yes, the man in Brooklyn Jacob goes to visit all these years. Yes, go on." "I believe it is man's task to make life holy. I believe—" "Asher Lev. "Yes?" "Asher Lev, you are entering the wrong world," she said. I was quiet. "Asher Lev, this world will destroy you. Art is not for people who want to make the world holy. You will be like a nun in a theater for the burlesque. Do you understand me, Asher Lev? If you want to make the world holy, stay in Brooklyn." I did not respond. There was a long silence. She stood peering gloomily out the window. "He does not take students, you know. He has never had students in America. He had students in Europe. When Hitler came, the students were not kind." She was silent a moment. Then she looked at me. "You will not hurt him," she said. "Many have hurt him. He is like a monk. There are so many things he does not understand." I did not know what to say. I shook my head. She smiled. "I am a possessive woman. I worry about my painters and sculptors. Where are your drawings, Asherlev? Jacob said you were bringing drawings." I handed her my sketchbooks. She placed them on one of the work tables near the wall of windows, opened one, and began slowly, very slowly, turning the pages. I watched her for a while. Her face was expressionless. She looked to be in her 60s, but I could not be certain. I wondered where Jacob Kahn was. I could not hear anyone else in the studio. I watched her slowly turning the pages of the sketchbook. Then I moved away from her. She did not seem to notice me. I began to walk about the room. It was an enormous room. The walls were huge. High overhead was a large skylight set in a slanted roof. One of its windows was open. Grey light fell across bronze and stone and wood sculptures that stood scattered about the floor, and across huge canvases that leaned against the walls, and smaller canvases set in easels. There were work tables everywhere, some cluttered with tubes of paint and various sizes of brushes and small rollers, others laden with chisels and mallets. There was dust and paint on the floor and walls, on the work tables and easels. I thought I could even see flecks of paint on the ceiling overhead. I felt tiny, surrounded by the enormity of the room and the creations it contained. I heard someone behind me and turned. It was Anna Schaefer. I had the feeling she had been watching me for some time. I saw her looking at 2 huge bronze sculptures directly before me. "I never weary of looking at those," she said. "I plead with him every week to let me take them. There are museums that want them, but he parts with very little now. He says he wants in his old age to be surrounded by the work of his hands. Here are your sketchbooks. You are, bluntly put, magnificent. Ingres would have been proud. You have a sense of line that can only be a gift. Do your people believe drawing is a gift from God, even though they despise drawing? No doubt they believe it is a gift of Satan, yes? In any event, your drawings of Guernica are astonishing. You even remembered to put in the dripping of the paint. There are other drawings of your street, yes? They are quite exquisite. Who is this man whom you draw so often?" "Udo Krinsky." I told her about him. "And this woman?" "My mother." "And this man?" "My father." She looked closely at the drawing of my father. She nodded slowly to herself. "And this?" "Someone I dream about. An ancestor." "Asher Lev, are you really 13 years old?" "Yes." "Why not?" she murmured. "Why not? Goya was 12. Picasso was 9. Why not? It could happen in Brooklyn to a boy with pios." She looked around. "Where is he?" "Jacob!" she called. "Jacob!" He came out of the dimness behind tall sculptures set in a far corner of the studio. He carried a glass in his hand and was smoking a cigarette. He walked quickly toward us, smiling, and gave her the glass. "You have become acquainted?" he said to the 2 of us. "Yes," Anna Schaefer said soberly. "We have become acquainted." She sipped from the glass and left a lipstick stain on its rim. "Whenever you tell me, Jacob. Any time you feel he is ready." She sipped again from her glass. "It will be 5 years," Jacob Kahn said to her. "Millions of people can draw. Art is whether or not there is a scream in him wanting to get out in a special way." "Or a laugh," she said. "Picasso laughs, too." "Or a laugh," he said. Millions of people can draw. My uncle Yitzchak had said that to me once. Millions of people can draw. When had he said that? Jacob Kahn turned to me and held out his hand, indicating the sketchbooks. I gave them to him, and he went through them quickly, then returned them to me. He looked at me in silence. He seemed sad. "Listen to me, Asher Lev. You can become a portrait painter. You can paint calendars for matzo companies. You can paint Rosh Hashanah greeting cards. What do you need this for?" I did not say anything. Anna Schaefer sipped quietly from her drink, her eyes fixed upon Jacob Kahn. "Do you understand what this is?" Jacob Kahn asked me, his strong voice rising. "Do you begin to understand what you are going to be doing to yourself? You understand now what Picasso did, yes? Even Picasso, the pagan, had to do this. At times there is no other way. Do you understand me, Asher Lev? This is not a toy. This is not a child scrawling on a wall. This is a tradition. It is a religion, Asher Lev. You are entering a religion called painting. It has its fanatics and its rebels, and I will force you to master it. Do you hear me? No one will listen to what you have to say unless they are convinced you have mastered it. Only one who has mastered a tradition has a right to attempt to add to it or to rebel against it. Do you understand me, Asher Lev?" I nodded slowly. "Asher Lev, it is a tradition of Goyim and pagans. Its values are Goyish and pagan. Its concepts are Goyish and pagan. Its way of life is Goyish and pagan. In the entire history of European art, there has not been a single religious Jew who was a great painter. Think carefully of what you are doing before you make your decision. I say this not only for the Rebbe, but for myself as well. I do not want to spend time with you, Asher Lev, and then have you tell me you made a mistake. Do you understand?" "Jacob," the woman said softly, "you are frightening the boy." "It is my intention to frighten him out of his wits. I want him to go back to Brooklyn and remain a nice Jewish boy. What does he need this for, Anna?" "What did you need it for, Jacob?" "I know what I went through." "Excuse us a moment, Asher," the woman said to me. She took Jacob Kahn's arm. They moved off toward the windows. I stood alone amidst the sculptures and canvases. I could hear them talking softly, but I could not make out the words. I stood there, surrounded by lines and shapes in metal and stone, tall, poignant sculptures of mothers and children, exquisite female heads, delicately turning torsos of men and women, black stone fists jutting like sudden screams from unpolished stone bases, entwined lovers, huge birds as in a fanaticist's dream, beasts from a private mythology, and shapes without representational form, exquisitely molded liquid motion in polished bronze. None of the canvases contained representational forms. They shimmered and vibrated with subtle harmonies and sudden complementaries, textured with sand and plaster, and, in one huge canvas, with small slivers of blue glass embedded in an impasto of swirling orange. They were powerful paintings of color and texture. His subject was color and texture, and I felt their sensuousness moving against me, and I was uncomfortable and a little afraid. I closed my eyes. I opened my eyes, and there was a flood of color again, a surge of sensuous power, raw, elemental, as when lengthy darkness is abruptly replaced by a sudden pouring in of sunlight. I had seen his canvases in the museum. They had not affected me this way. None of them had had this quality of raw sensuousness. An easel stood a few feet away to my left. There was a painting on it, similar to, but smaller in size than the others. I looked at it closely and saw it was dry. I removed it and put it against the edge of an untouched canvas. A row of small white stretched canvases stood against the wall. I picked up a canvas and put it on the easel. There were tubes of oil colors on the adjoining table, along with brushes and turpentine. I painted hands and a face onto the canvas. I worked swiftly, doing the mouth and eyes and mustache and hair, then moving colors through the space behind the head. Set back from the head, I painted an easel with the canvas and a face on the canvas. I made the face pale and the earlocks red. I omitted painting pupils into the eyes. The eyes stared blankly from the canvas within the canvas. I put the brushes on the table and stepped back, and moved heavily into Jacob Kahn. I felt his powerful hands on my shoulders, holding me so I would not fall. I felt him holding me, almost in an embrace, and then he released me. He was looking at the canvas. "Anna has scolded me severely for my bluntness," he said quietly, looking at the canvas. "It is in my nature to be blunt." He put his large hands into the pockets of his dungarees and stood very straight, still looking at the canvas. "I do not know what to say to you, Asherlev. I am moved by your trust. But you see better at 13 than I did at 18. When you are 18, perhaps you will see better than I did at 25. "At 25 you had been through 2 pogroms, the woman said to him. He looked at her. "The eye inside a man is not improved by pogroms." "You underestimate yourself, Jacob." "No," he said. "I know about eyes. I have lived and worked with some of the best eyes of our century. You have seen the drawings of his street. That is an eye drawing, Anna. Hands alone do not find that way." "First you frighten him too much, now you praise him too much. You are an impossible man, Jacob Kahn." "No," he said. "It is not Jacob Kahn who is impossible." He turned abruptly to me. "Listen, Asherlev, I cannot teach you too much more about how to see. I will teach you some tricks. Then you will throw the tricks away and invent your own. I will teach you composition. I will teach you how to create tension. I will teach you how to handle rage in color and line. You draw with too much love. No man can love as much as you and survive as an artist. You will become sentimental, and sentimentalism is death to art. Do you understand what I'm saying?" "No, of course not. How can you understand that? You are 13 years old." "I must remember that you are only 13 years old." "Jacob," the woman said, "I must go." "Wait. I want you to hear what I have to say." "I will miss my flight." "You will not miss your flight. It is not yet 4 o'clock. Listen to what I say to the boy. He will be as much yours as mine." He turned to me. "Asherlev, I will give you 5 years of my time. If at the end of those 5 years you are not ready for Anna, we are finished, and it will all have been a waste. If, however, you are ready for Anna, I will make suggestions as to how we are to proceed. I want you to understand something. It is not in my nature to begin a relationship with a lie. I am not doing this as a favor to the Rebbe. I have respect for the Rebbe, but I have passion for my art. The Rebbe asked me to guide you and to keep you from evil ways. Those were his words. I do not know what evil is when it comes to art. I only know what is good and what is bad art. Those were my words to the Rebbe. The Rebbe trusts me and will rely on my honest heart. Those were the Rebbe's answering words to my remarks. I will not teach you on the basis of that trust. Artists should not be trusted. If an artist is not deceitful every so often in the cause of his art, then he is a poor artist. Those were my remarks to the Rebbe. Still, he trusts me. So be it. He trusts me. But it is of no real consequence to me whether the Rebbe does or does not trust me. I am taking you on not as a favor to the Rebbe, but because you have greatness. I am selfish. All artists are selfish and self-centered. I am taking you on because I will derive pleasure in molding your greatness, just as I derive pleasure in molding clay and marble. For 5 years I will sculpt you and bring out of you what is already inside you. I will work with your faults and flaws and genius, as Michelangelo worked with the flaws and the power of the marble that became his David. Are you listening to me, Asher Lev? Do you hear me, Anna? I am 72 years old. I do not have 5 years to give to anything that is less than a marble for a David. He looked at the woman. Do you have anything you wish to say, Anna? Yes, the woman said. I have a plane to catch to London. Go catch your plane. Give Oscar my good wishes. Tell him I will be in London in June for his retrospective. Tell him prune juice is good for old age if used in moderation. You are an impossible old man, the woman said. Do not let him frighten you, Asher Lev. I have a stake in you. Your art will one day make you famous, and me and you rich. You are already rich, Jacob Kahn said. It can never hurt to become richer. Go catch your plane. There are men here with work to do. I wish you luck, Asher Lev. Everything else you already have. She offered me her hand. I took it without hesitation. Goodbye, Asher Lev. Her grip was warm and firm. Jacob Kahn took her to the door. They talked quietly for a moment. Then he opened the door for her and walked with her along the hallway to the elevator. They continued talking quietly. The elevator came and she stepped inside. Then she was gone, and Jacob Kahn was back in the studio. He closed the door softly behind him and stood there, his hands jammed into his dungaree pockets, looking at me. She is a great woman, he said quietly. She found me in Paris when I was starving. You are fortunate. I do not think you will ever starve. He moved away from the door and came slowly toward me. You have a gift, Asher Lev. You have a responsibility. He stopped in front of me. Do you know what that responsibility is? I did not say anything. Tell me what you think that responsibility is, he said. I was quiet. I did not know what to say. Do you feel you are responsible to anyone? To anything? To my people, I said hesitantly. What people? To Jews. To Jews, he echoed. Why do you think you are responsible to Jews? All Jews are responsible for one another, I said, quoting the statement from the Talmud my father had years ago quoted to me. As an artist, you are responsible to Jews. He seemed angry. Listen to me, Asher Lev. As an artist, you are responsible to no one and to no thing, except to yourself and to the truth as you see it. Do you understand? An artist is responsible to his art. Anything else is propaganda. Anything else is what the communists in Russia call art. I will teach you responsibility to art. Don't interrupt my work. Let your lad over Hasidim teach you responsibility to Jews. Do you understand? Yes, I think you understand. You did not do what you did to your family without understanding that. It is not weakness to feel guilty at having done it, but the guilt should not interfere with your art. Use the guilt to make better art. Now come with me to this canvas. I'm going to teach you that painting is not storytelling. If you want to tell stories, become either an illustrator or a writer. If you want to be a painter, you will learn to use line and color and shape and texture to create paintings, not stories. Now look at this canvas and tell me what you see. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about line and color and shape and texture. Then he watched me make a pen and ink drawing of a little boy and girl walking hand in hand along my street. Then I watched him make a pen and ink drawing of a row of low houses around a small cobblestone square. One of the houses was very dilapidated. Narrow, winding streets led away from the square. There were trees and benches in the square, and old metal lampposts. This is my street, he said. It is called Place Émile Godot. When I lived in this old building here, the street used to be called Rue Ravignon. It may still be called that today. I have not been back in a very long time. Do you see this old building? We called it the Bateau Lavoir. Max Jacob named it. You have never heard of Max Jacob? He was a poet. He was a Jew who became a Catholic out of conviction. But the Nazis killed him anyway. Picasso lived here. God, how poor we were, and how hard we worked. We changed the eyes of the world. This is my street, Asherlev. The street where I was born does not exist. It is a park now in Kiev, but this street is where I was truly born. He was silent a long time, his shoulders bowed as he sat over the drawing. The things we talk about, he murmured. Who will ever know of the things we talked about? He was silent again. Then he raised his head to look at me, his eyes very narrow. I wondered a long time who would ever know of the things we talked about. He was silent once again. He resumed drawing. He drew a room with a window facing a sloping hill and rooftops. He drew a short man painting strange faces and figures onto a huge canvas. He drew a tall man painting square and rectangular objects onto a small canvas. He drew himself carving sharp wedges into a block of stone. He seemed lost in his drawing. I sat and watched him work. His huge hand grasped the pen and gave life to the lines that flowed from it. I saw his street alive, saw its shops, its cafes, its poverty, its bitter winters, its artists. I do not remember how many drawings of that street he made that day, but before he was done I felt the street as part of my own parkway, its trees and benches and lampposts part of what I saw each day as I gazed through the window of my living room onto the world I wanted to create anew, with line and color and texture and shape. Later, as we stood at the door, he said to me, "You will come every Sunday afternoon, yes? We will work and talk. Can you come next Sunday afternoon?" I told him I could not come because next Sunday was 2 days before Passover, and my father would be home. I would not want to come again until my father left, I said. Your father knows about us, Asher. I did not want to hurt my father unnecessarily, I said. I would wait until after he left. I understand, but I am disappointed. You will bring more drawings with you next time, and bring an oil painting. A new painting, one you will make between now and next time. Remember what we talked about. Do not paint me a story, paint me a painting. Goodbye, Asherlev. Have a good Pesach. I walked along the dim, empty corridor to the elevator. The building seemed to echo faintly. A short man painting a huge canvas, and nearby, a tall man painting a small canvas. I heard the whine of the elevator. Bateau lavoir. Laundry boat, like the laundry boats on the Seine. It was built on the side of a hill, and you came in on the street floor as you would onto the deck of a ship, and went down its dark corridors and stairways to the rooms below. Named by Max Jacob, a Jew who became a Catholic and died as a Jew. The elevator door opened. I stepped inside. The door closed. I felt the elevator start down. You've been there a long time, the old man with the rheumy eyes said. I barely heard him. 4 hours, he said in his hoarse voice. I looked at my watch. It was almost 6 o'clock. You studying to be a painter? I nodded. He looked at me closely and shook his head. The elevator stopped. He opened the door. Sign out in the book there, he said, and shuffled off toward a room near the end of the elevator corridor. I put 552 in the out column next to my name. I noticed the signature directly above mine, Anna Schaffer. I stared at it for a moment. Then I put on my hat and coat and came out of the building. The door closed shut behind me. A cold wind blew through the street. I stood alongside the metal and glass door of the building and prayed the afternoon service. Then I took the subway home. I was back a few minutes before 7. The apartment was dark. On the kitchen table I found a note from my mother. My supper was on a plate in the refrigerator. My mother was at an emergency meeting with the Rebbe's staff. She did not know when she would be back. I ate supper alone in the silent apartment. Then I went to the living room and looked out the window at the street. This is my street, I heard Jacob Kahn say. This street is where I was truly born. I stood at the window and stared out at the trees and lampposts and rushing cars. I saw rushing cars and small shops and outdoor cafes and old lampposts. I saw cobblestones and the cement of our sidewalk. I saw the wide parkway and the benches. I saw people walking beneath bare trees. I saw my mother walking beneath bare trees. She was walking very quickly. Coming toward the house, she looked up and saw me in the window and made a gesture of greeting. I was at the door to the apartment when she came out of the elevator. I helped her take off her coat. She was pale. I followed her into the kitchen. She put the kettle on the stove. How was your day with Jacob Kahn? She asked. Very good. Mama, will you be able to learn a lot from him? Yes, Mama. Is anything wrong? Yes, she said. Your father will not be home for Pesach. I stared at her. No one knows where your father is, she said. Papa isn't in Europe? No one knows. The Rebbe knows. The Rebbe told me to have faith in the Rabbano Shel Olam. The Rebbe doesn't know where Papa is? The Rebbe didn't tell me whether he does or doesn't know. He only told me to have faith in the Rabbano Shel Olam. Papa's in Russia, I said. My mother said nothing. He's in Russia, I said, feeling the cold of horror. My mother did not respond. Her face was sallow. Her hands trembled faintly as she poured boiling water from the kettle into a cup. Do you have homework? Yes. Go do your homework, Asher. I have to prepare for my classes tomorrow. When will Papa be home? No one knows. He won't be home until Rosh Hashanah? No one knows. Mama, go and do your homework, Asher, please. Please. I left her sitting at the table over her cup of coffee. I could not do my homework. I lay in my bed and thought of my father in Russia. I saw him at secret meetings of Ladover Hasidim, conveying the Rebbe's words of hope and faith. The Rebbe remembers you, I kept hearing him say. The Rebbe blesses you. The Rebbe asks you not to forget the Master of the universe. The Rebbe has you always in his mind and heart. I saw him journeying through small mud-caked towns and large stone and steel cities, meeting 2 Hasidim there, 10 Hasidim there, teaching, praying, urging that faith not be abandoned despite the dark and awesome power of the Sitra Archa. I saw him establishing yeshivos in basements and cellars. I saw him watched by the 1,000 eyes of secret police. I saw him arrested and beaten and sent to... I slept and had horror-filled dreams. The next morning my mother looked as if she had not slept at all. We heard nothing more about my father the rest of that week. Everyone in school seemed to know he was missing, though no one said anything openly to me. Teachers left me alone. Classmates became kind. The mashpia called me into his office and talked to me about the need to have faith in the Rabbano Shel Olam. Mrs. Rackover moved about the apartment in gentle silence. My uncle Yitzchak invited us to his seder, and my mother accepted. Yudo Krinsky sighed repeatedly as he filled a small box with the tubes of oil colors I had bought, then told me he was adding 3 brushes at no cost. A Pesach gift, he said in his hoarse voice. He seemed deeply sad and fearful. I spent late Thursday afternoon in the library, looking at a color reproduction of Michelangelo's David. The next Sunday afternoon, I came out of my school and walked to the subway and journeyed again to Jacob Kahn.